Here's something nobody tells you about healing. It happens in the dark. While you're sleeping, while you're distracted, while you're convinced nothing is changing at all. Your psyche is quietly reorganizing itself, rewiring neural pathways, integrating fragments of experience you thought would haunt you forever. And here's the strange part. You're probably already healed from something that nearly broke you, and you have absolutely no idea. Think about that. Right now, as you're reading this, you might be carrying around an identity that no longer fits. You might be calling yourself broken when the cracks have already mended. You might be telling yourself you're still recovering when recovery already happened 6 months ago. Carl Jung understood something that modern psychology is only beginning to grasp. He knew that the psyche doesn't heal the way we think it should. There's no finish line, no certificate of completion, no moment where trumpets sound and you suddenly feel whole. Instead, healing is more like seasons changing. You don't notice spring arriving on a specific Tuesday afternoon. You just look up one day and realize the trees have leaves again. When did that happen? You can't say. It just did. Over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you 7 signs that prove you've healed more than you realize. These aren't the obvious markers. They're subtle psychological shifts that indicate deep transformation has occurred in your inner world. And I'm warning you now, this might be uncomfortable, because recognizing your own healing means giving up the familiar story of brokenness you've been telling yourself. Before we go deeper, if this resonates with where you are in your journey, hit that subscribe button. Let's start with what we misunderstand about the entire healing process. We've been sold a lie about how healing works. The story goes like this. You experience trauma, you fall apart, you do the work, you get better. A straight line from damage to recovery, point A to point B. But Jung knew this was nonsense. The psyche doesn't operate like a machine you repair at the mechanic. It's more like a forest ecosystem, complex, interconnected, with processes happening on levels you can't see. Fungi communicating underground, seeds germinating in darkness, trees sharing nutrients through root systems. Your healing is happening right now in ways your conscious mind can't perceive. Jung called this the unconscious doing its work. And the unconscious doesn't send you progress reports. It doesn't notify you when integration is complete. It just quietly transforms you while you're busy thinking you're still the same mess you were last year. Here's what this means practically. You can't actually measure your own healing accurately. You're too close to it. It's like trying to watch yourself age in the mirror. The changes are too gradual, too incremental. You need time and distance to see what's really happened. That's why old friends are sometimes shocked when they see you after years apart. They remember who you were. They can see the transformation you've been blind to. To them, it's obvious. To you, you just feel like yourself. So if you can't trust your own assessment of your healing, what can you trust? You look for markers, signs. Evidence that transformation has occurred beneath conscious awareness. That's what these 7 signs are. They're not goals to achieve. They're byproducts of deep psychological work. Natural results of what Jung called the individuation process. The journey toward becoming your most authentic self. Let's get into them. Here's the first sign, and it's deceptively simple. You no longer feel compelled to justify your choices to people who don't matter. Think back to who you were a few years ago. Someone questions your decision, any decision, and you launch into an elaborate explanation. You need them to understand. You need them to approve. You need them to see that you're reasonable, that you're not crazy, that you have good reason. The anxiety of being misunderstood was unbearable. So you over-explained everything. Your career choices, your relationship status, why you dress the way you do, why you like what you like, why you are the way you are. But something shifted, and you probably didn't notice when. Now someone asks why you made a choice, and you say, because it felt right. And that's enough. You don't need to convince them. You don't need their validation. You're not building a legal case for your own existence. Jung would say you've strengthened the ego's relationship with the self. That sounds abstract, but here's what it means. Your sense of identity is no longer entirely dependent on external validation. You've developed an internal reference point, an inner knowing that doesn't require constant confirmation from the outside world. This is huge. This is evidence that you've integrated aspects of yourself you were previously unsure about. The insecure version of you needed everyone to understand because you weren't sure you understood yourself. You needed external validation because internal validation hadn't developed yet. But now, you know yourself. Not perfectly, not completely, but well enough that someone else's confusion about your choices doesn't destabilize you. You can let people misunderstand you. You can let them think you're weird or wrong or making a mistake. It doesn't shake you the way it used to. This isn't arrogance. It's not thinking you're always right. It's something deeper. It's self-trust. It's the quiet confidence that comes from having spent time in your own psyche and emerging with a clearer sense of who you actually are. If you've noticed this shift, even slightly, that's profound healing. That's your psyche telling you it's integrated material that was once fragmented. Second sign. You've developed the capacity to be uncomfortable without immediately trying to make the discomfort go away. This one reveals itself in small moments. You're in a conversation that's awkward. In the past, you would have filled the silence, made a joke, changed the subject, anything to dissolve the tension. Now, you can just sit there. You can let the awkwardness exist without rescuing everyone from it. Or you feel sad, not depressed, not crisis level, just sad. Old, you would have immediately distracted yourself, turned on the TV, scrolled social media, called a friend, gone shopping, anything to avoid feeling the feeling. New you can feel sad, and just let it be sad. You don't need to fix it, or figure it out, or make it mean something catastrophic about your life. Jung talked about this as developing the capacity to hold tension. He believed that transformation happens in the space between opposites, in the discomfort of not knowing, in the anxiety of uncertainty. Most people can't tolerate that space. They collapse it immediately. They make a decision, any decision, just to relieve the pressure. They choose sides, pick an answer, commit to a position, anything to escape the discomfort of ambiguity. But psychological maturity requires sitting in that fire. It requires being able to not know, to not fix, to not immediately resolve every uncomfortable feeling that arises. This capacity develops slowly. You can't force it. But as you heal, as you do the work of examining your inner world, you realize something profound. Discomfort isn't an emergency. That's the shift. Discomfort used to feel like danger. Your nervous system would activate, fight or flight. You had to do something, anything, to make it stop. But now you've learned through repeated experience that you can feel uncomfortable and survive it. The discomfort doesn't kill you. It doesn't even damage you. It's just an experience passing through. This is emotional regulation at a deep level. Not the kind where you suppress feelings or talk yourself out of them. The kind where you simply allow them to exist without amplifying or resisting them. If you can sit with difficult emotions without immediately reaching for the fix, the distraction, the solution, you've healed more than you think. That's evidence of a nervous system that's learned safety. That's a psyche that's integrated enough to handle complexity. Third sign, and this one's fascinating. When you think about your past, especially painful parts of your past, it feels distant, almost like it happened to someone else. I don't mean you've dissociated from it or repressed it. That's different. That's disconnection. What I'm describing is integration. You can remember what happened, you can talk about it if needed, but the emotional charge is gone. The story doesn't hook you anymore. Someone brings up an ex who destroyed you, and you feel nothing. Not bitterness, not longing, just neutrality. Like they're a character from a book you read years ago. You remember being fired from that job, but the shame and humiliation have evaporated. It's just a thing that happened. Part of your history, but not part of your identity. Jung called this the transcendent function at work. It's the psyche's ability to take conflicting or painful experiences and metabolize them into something new. The experience doesn't disappear, but it transforms. Think of it like this. When you eat food, your body breaks it down. The apple you ate for breakfast doesn't stay an apple. It becomes energy, becomes cells, becomes you. You've integrated it. That's what happens with psychological material when it's properly processed. The painful experience breaks down. It integrates. It becomes part of your wisdom, part of your depth, part of your story. But it's no longer this raw, undigested trauma sitting in your psyche. This is why people who've healed significantly can tell their trauma stories without re-traumatizing themselves. They're not reliving it as they speak, they're recounting it. There's distance, there's perspective. The past is no longer happening in the present. If you've noticed this shift, if your history feels like history rather than current reality, that's profound evidence of healing. Your psyche has successfully processed and integrated experiences that once felt overwhelming. Fourth sign. You've lost your attachment to being right in arguments. Now, I'm not saying you don't have opinions or that you've become a doormat, but something fundamental has shifted in how you engage with disagreement. In the past, arguments felt like threats. Someone disagreeing with you felt like an attack on your very existence. You had to win. You had to prove them wrong. You had to defend your position with everything you had. Because on some level, your ego couldn't distinguish between your ideas and your identity. An attack on your opinion felt like an attack on you. But Jung understood that the ego is just one part of the psyche. It's not the totality of who you are. And as you individuate, as you develop relationship with the deeper self, the ego relaxes its death grip on being right. Now, when someone disagrees with you, you can actually hear them. You can consider their perspective. You can think, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about it that way. You can even change your mind without feeling like you've lost something, because your sense of self isn't riding on the outcome of the argument. This is maturity, real maturity. Not the kind where you pretend to be agreeable. The kind where you're genuinely curious about other perspectives, because you're secure enough in yourself that different viewpoints don't threaten you. You can hold your opinions lightly. You can say, this is what I think, but I could be wrong. And you mean it. The insecure psyche can't do this. It needs certainty. It needs to be right, because being wrong feels like annihilation. But the integrated psyche understands something deeper. Truth is complex. Reality is multifaceted, and your perspective is just one angle on an infinitely complicated situation. If you've noticed yourself becoming less defensive, less combative, less attached to winning arguments, that's significant healing. That's evidence that your ego has relaxed, that you've developed connection with something deeper than your need to be right. Fifth sign, and this one's specifically Jungian, your dream life has fundamentally changed. Now, if you don't remember dreams, this might not apply. But for those who do engage with dreams, pay attention. Because dreams are direct messages from the unconscious. When you're in psychological distress, when you're fragmented, when you're carrying unprocessed trauma, dreams reflect that chaos. Nightmares, recurring anxiety dreams, being chased, being trapped, showing up to school naked, teeth falling out, the classic anxiety dream repertoire. These aren't random. They're your unconscious mind trying to process overwhelming material. They're signals that something needs attention. But as you heal, as you do the work of integration, the dream landscape shifts. Not suddenly, gradually. The nightmares become less frequent. Or if they occur, they're less intense. You might have a scary dream, but you're not helpless in it anymore. You find resources. You discover you can fight back, or fly away, or wake yourself up. Recurring dreams, the ones you've had for years, they might resolve. The scenario completes, or it just stops happening altogether. You might start having what Jung called big dreams. Dreams that feel significant, that carry weight, that leave you with a sense of meaning, even if you can't fully interpret them. Dreams of vast landscapes, deep waters, ancient buildings, wise figures who speak to you, journeys where you're searching for something important. These suggest that the unconscious is communicating with consciousness in a new way. The barriers between them are more permeable. Integration is happening. Pay attention to the emotional tone of your dreams. How do you feel in them? How do you feel when you wake up? If there's been a shift from terror and helplessness to curiosity and empowerment, even subtly, that's your unconscious confirming the healing work you've done. Your dreams know before your waking mind does. They're always ahead, always showing you the current state of your psyche. If the landscape has changed, you've changed. You've become selective about energy exchange. Sixth sign, you've developed discernment about where you invest your energy. There's a version of you that said yes to everything. Coffee with people you didn't really want to see. Events you didn't care about. Conversations that drained you. Relationships that took more than they gave. You did this because you didn't think you had permission to say no. You thought being a good person meant being available to everyone. You thought setting boundaries made you selfish. But something shifted. And I'm guessing it wasn't a dramatic moment. You didn't wake up one day and decide to change everything. It was gradual. Someone asks for your time, and you pause. You actually consider whether you want to give it. And if the answer is no, you say no, without guilt, without elaborate excuses. You realize your energy is finite. Your attention is valuable. Your time is the only resource you can't replenish. Jung would say you've differentiated yourself from the collective. You've stopped living according to what everyone expects and started living according to what's actually right for you. This isn't selfishness. It's self-preservation. It's recognizing that you can't give from an empty cup, that you're not responsible for managing everyone else's emotions, that other people's emergencies don't automatically become your obligation. You've become selective about friendships. Some relationships have naturally faded, and you haven't chased them. Not out of bitterness, just out of recognition that they don't serve growth anymore. You've learned to distinguish between connections that energize you and connections that deplete you. And you've given yourself permission to invest more in the former and less in the latter. This selectivity extends to information too. You're probably more careful about what you consume, what news you read, what content you watch, what conversations you engage in. You've realized that everything you take in affects your internal state, and you've become protective of that state. This is sophisticated boundary setting. This is evidence that you've developed a clear sense of self, distinct from others. You know where you end and they begin. If you've noticed yourself becoming more selective, more boundaried, more protective of your energy, that's profound healing. That's your psyche telling you it knows its own worth. Seventh and final sign, and this might be the most powerful, you've developed genuine gratitude for what broke you. Not toxic positivity, not pretending everything happens for a reason. Something deeper than that. You can look at your past pain, your trauma, your suffering, and recognize that it forged something in you that couldn't have developed any other way. That betrayal taught you discernment. That failure taught you resilience. That loss taught you what actually matters. That depression taught you compassion. You wouldn't choose to go through it again, but you wouldn't erase it either, because erasing it would erase who you've become. Jung called this the union of opposites, the recognition that your wounds and your wisdom are inseparable, that your greatest strengths grew directly from your deepest struggle. This isn't something you can force. You can't think your way into gratitude for suffering. It emerges naturally when you've done the work of integration, when you've sat with the pain long enough to understand it, when you've examined it from enough angles to see its gifts, when you've metabolized it so thoroughly that it's become part of your foundation rather than a wound you're carrying. This is what separates healing from mere recovery. Recovery is getting back to where you were before. Healing is becoming someone new, someone who includes the suffering as part of their depth. You meet people now who haven't suffered deeply, and you can feel the difference. Not that you're better, just that you're different. You carry weight they don't. You see layers they can't. You understand things that can only be understood through direct experience. And strange as it sounds, you value this. You wouldn't trade your depth for their innocence. This is integration. This is wholeness. This is Jung's individuation process, arriving at something real. If you can honestly say you're grateful, even partially, for what once destroyed you, you've healed more than you think. That's your psyche confirming that the transformation is complete. So here we are, 7 signs that healing has been happening beneath your awareness. Let's anchor this. Really feel this. You've stopped explaining yourself. You can sit with discomfort. Your past feels distant. You're less interested in being right. Your dreams have shifted. You've become selective about energy. You feel gratitude for your scars. If even 2 or 3 of these resonate, you've transformed more than you realize. Now, here's what's important. Don't use this as a checklist. Don't turn this into another thing to achieve. These signs emerge naturally from the individuation process. You can't force them. Your job is to keep doing the work. Keep examining your inner world. Keep making the unconscious conscious. Keep integrating what you find. The rest happens on its own. Jung spent his entire life studying this process. He understood that becoming whole isn't about perfection. It's about integration, including everything, accepting everything, light and shadow, strength and weakness, wisdom and foolishness. You're not trying to become someone else. You're trying to become more fully who you already are. And if you're on that path, if you're doing that work, if you can recognize even fragments of these signs in your life, then let this be confirmation. You're further along than you think. The healing is real. The transformation is happening. And you're exactly where you need to be. I want to hear your experience. Which of these 7 signs resonated most with you? What healing have you been dismissing or minimizing? Drop a comment below and share your story. Because when you name your growth, when you acknowledge your transformation, you make it conscious. And consciousness is where real power lives. If this video helped you see yourself more clearly, hit that subscribe button. This channel explores the depths of human psychology, the parts that don't get talked about in surface level content. This is about real transformation, real integration, real healing. And there's so much more to explore together. Your healing matters. Your journey is valid, and you're doing better than you think. I'll see you in the next one.